Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Lori Charlton. It's May 9th, 2024. I want to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Board of Finance. I'll call the meeting to order. Ask that we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the members of the public who've dialed in or joined us on the WebEx tonight, please know that you are muted and will not be heard by board members, and there will be no live public comment until called for during the meeting. We welcome public comment on voting items 3, 4, and 6 on tonight's agenda, and we'll take public comment on any of those items at the beginning of the meeting before the board begins its deliberations. Members of the public who are logged in through WebEx should use the chat function now to indicate you'd like to be heard. And we ask that any comments be limited to 3 minutes. Members of the public are always encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board at the following email, bof@fairfieldct.org. If you do so, please remember to include your name and address in your email as you would with live comment. Okay, so before we move to item 3, any comments from the public? Anyone on WebEx? All right, so we'll move to item 3 to hear, consider and act upon the suspense list for the tax collector. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Mr. Curley. The backup has been posted online, and for board members, it is available in your printed packets. And we have our tax collector, Dave Kay, here to walk us through this. I'm not the only one who doesn't attempt your last name, Dave, so sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Well, first off, I want to apologize. The backup should be printed and on the table there. A total mix-up on my part, but the suspense list from last year was mistakenly submitted ahead of time. So what was ever in the packet beforehand is incorrect. And the correct material should be in front of you on the table.
Thank you.
And so the amount that I'm requesting to be suspended this year is $156,841.51. And so through the due diligence of my office, we have determined that a combination of both motor vehicle taxes and business personal property taxes we just don't anticipate collecting it for various number of reasons. So some of these are motor vehicle taxes that are over 6 years old. So the 3-year registration window at DMV has closed. A additional 3-year time period where a collection agency has attempted to locate these individuals has passed as well for motor vehicle. And then for business personal property, we have a delinquent tax collector that will examine all accounts, look at whether or not the business personal property is out of business, or there's other situations where property has been abandoned. We no longer anticipate collecting, but at the same time, for a period of 15 years, these taxes do still remain collectible.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And just to clarify, we're going to suspend these. However, are the efforts to collect going to continue? I just wanted to understand
Correct.
That last comment.
Yes. So especially the motor vehicle. So they're with our collection agency, but we don't ask that the collection agency stops collections. Can you still hear me? I lost video.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So we don't by any means stop collections. It's really just us stating that we've exhausted all efforts and have not collected it. But if in the case of a motor vehicle, if someone moves out of the state and then they just 10 years later, they come back and the taxes are still on the books, then that issue of, well, if they need to register but they owe taxes, would still apply.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the suspense list referenced in the agenda and provided to the board, please say aye. Okay, Mr. Penley, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Testani, and Ms. Leclerc, did you vote? I didn't see your hand.
I think I would like to abstain because I don't have the list in front of me.
Okay.
And so I don't feel prepared to vote for it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? Abstention, Ms. Leclerc. Okay, so the motion passes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 0, 1. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4, to hear, consider, and set the mill rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024, and ending June 30th, 2025. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Curley, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Okay, the backup for this item is posted online in the meeting materials on pages 12 through 18. Mr. Becker, who is going to take us through this item?
I can take everybody through it.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Yeah, no problem. So I believe this begins on PDF page 12, which is the cover page. Next page is just the table of contents, walking through all the schedules. Schedule A is just a walkthrough of, how the mill rate is calculated. It just provides a little bit of context. The one I'll start and do most of my talking about is Schedule B, which I believe is page 15 of the PDF. And so what I did here was I just showed the schedule of the current year tax levy and noted the changes really made by the RTM and some changes based on changes in assessment that we have. So the RTM net added about $30,000 to the budget. You could see that there going down to the net current year tax levy required. The collection rate was adjusted just as a matter of rounding throughout the budget process. When I take the gross levy and I divide it by the property available for assessment, usually, the computer will round out to however many decimal places. We can only round out to 5 decimal places. So if you have a mill rate of 0.02790, which is the second row from the bottom, you'd have to have a collection rate of 99.01%. Another notable change on this sheet is if you look at BAA adjustments and other, in the proposed budget, we were carrying an assumption of 10 million. Now that the BAA process and all the other adjustments have occurred up to this point, it's closer to about 11.5 million. So that's reflected there. So the property available for assessment went down for a little bit, but the mill rate increase still stays the same under this at 1.42%. And then I'll stop for questions, but the only other page I'll mention is Schedule D, which is PDF page 17. That's going to say, that's your menu of options if you wanted to, go up by, a 0.01 of a mil. You'd have to have a collection rate of 99.05%. It would result in a tax rate increase of 1.38%. If you went the other way, this is just showing what would happen. So I'll pause there for questions if there are any.
Frank, what were you just referring to? I lost you.
If you go to PDF page 17, it's Schedule D, so it's 2 pages after the page that I did the walkthrough, 2 pages after Schedule B. That's going to show you if you went up 0.01 on the mill on the mill.
Thank you.
Or if you went down 0.01 on the mill, that's kind of the menu of options with the assessment as it is.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Before we go to the board, Mr. Gerber, Mr. Becker, any comments from your perspective on these scenarios in front of us?
Just recommending the 99.01 collection at the 27.90. It's pretty much remained stable through most of our discussions. And we did review state, revenue and other variables and feel confident that this is the right rate and that it backs in. So that's just our recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the board? Ms. Ruggiero?
When the original budget was put together, what was the tax rate that was in there?
The original proposed budget, I think it was, that's crazy, I forgot already, but I'll look it up. I have it right
Isn't it
here.
like 98.99 or something?
No, it was
Well, you-
99.00 in the first selectmen's budget.
99 even?
Right
Okay.
at it.
That sounds
When
about
you
right.
took up sense of the body, there was a proposal to adjust that. Is this higher than that number?
Well, if it was 99 and this is 99.01, what we did was we took a sense of the body to not adjust the collection rate to, at that point in time, when we were going to communicate, to make up for any changes that were made at the Board of Selectmen table. Yeah. So I think it was basically the same, maybe 1 basis point different. Mr.
So
Matola?
proposed, it was 98.99.
98.99. Yeah, that's what I remember. Okay, so 2 basis points. John?
So I'm okay with that. And the reasoning is, if you look at the next page, which is Schedule E, the 5-year average actual's been 99.02. So it's not like it's totally in line with the 5-year averages. And that excludes 2022 because it was a COVID year, if I recall correctly. So for me, I think it's rational and reasonable and reflects what the collection rate actually has been over the last 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Matola. Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions. One is with respect to the BAA net grand list adjustment. Last year it's 13.3. In the original budget from the first selectman, it was 10 flat, and now we're at 11.5. Can you just elaborate a little bit about what that BAA adjustment reflects and what's driving the change from last year to where we are tonight?
Where's that, Craig? I'm sorry.
The BAA adjustment,
Page.
it's
Yeah.
Schedule B.
Yeah, so there's, so at the beginning of the budget process, I get a net assessment. When Ross signs off on the grand list, I get a net assessment number. And we make an assumption on BAA adjustments is one piece, but the other is actually also very important because there's other things that are happening. Throughout the process, the BAA hears appeals, and there are other things like certificates of corrections and court settlements that occur, and that's the number that picks those up. So from when the grand list was signed and I put the assessment into the budget to now, there were about $11.1 million in adjustments. I asked Ross, kind of for some more detail on the breakout of those adjustments. So about 5.8 million was related to certificates of correction. 5.4 million was related to court settlements. 1.9 million was related to BAA, and the rest is related to exempt property.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I did have another one, but I'm going to defer to the other questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. And just for the benefit of the public, so BAA adjustments are adjustments made by or I think there are a variety of adjustments in there. BAA stands for Board of Assessment Appeals, and the mill rate is a function of our expenses, the collection rate we assume on taxes, and the property that's available for assessment. So when adjustments are made by the BAA, so for example, if someone challenges their assessment and has it reduced, that will lower the amount in the grand list. And so in our original budget, that number was 10 million. It was an estimate. Last year it was 13.3 million. So the adjustment that the number we're talking about here is a small change. Well, it's $1.5 million, but that's on the total assessed property. So that's a change from the $10 million assumption that was in our original budget presentation. Other questions on this, Mr. Testani?
Yeah, so just maybe a little more clarification. What would the difference, what would you attribute it to? Or what does Frank attribute it to, I should say? The 10 million.
Yeah, so that was, so the difference is that just when I get the grand list from Ross in January or at the end of January, he makes an assumption on what those adjustments are going to be. And then this is kind of showing what the adjustments actually were up to this date.
Which is $1.5 million higher, correct?
Higher than, yes, than we anticipated.
Than what was budgeted, okay.
Yeah.
And just for clarification in my head on this, on the mill rate. So the proposal from the Board of Selectmen was 98.99, correct? That was what the Board of Selectmen.
I think they bumped it up a little bit. And then I think with the sense of this body, it was to take it back down.
To the 98.99, is that right? So just to be clear.
98.99 was the first selectmen's original recommendation. And then the Board of Selectmen increased it slightly to offset some additional expenses that they put in the budget. And then this body, when we originally talked about it, we said for purposes of talking about the mill rate, we're just going to use the original number.
That's when you got the sense of the body.
Right. That's when we got the sense of the body, because none of this gets decided until tonight, but that's the history. Yes.
Okay, so 98.99, right, was the first mill rate.
First selectmen.
First selectmen. Yeah.
Okay, the board, and I'm sorry, no, you just said it. I'm just trying to get it clear in my head. What was selected by the board?
The Board of Selectmen was,
They assumed 99.07.
99.07, Frank?
Correct.
99.07.
99.07. And this is proposing the 99.01, is that?
yeah. And the 9907, again, for benefit of the public, that was just sort of reverse engineered to keep the mill rate constant, despite the fact that some expenses were added by the Board of Selectmen. So, knowing that ultimately this board would vote on a final number.
But what's being proposed tonight is the 99.01.
99.01, which again is sort of engineered to get to the number that we all assumed it would be, a 1.42% increase when we voted on the budget. Yes. And the other options are laid out in Schedule D. Other questions from the board? Mr. Becker, did you have a comment?
Just so when 98.99, the Board of Selectmen went 99.07.
Mhm.
Board of Finance brought it back to 98.99.
Mhm.
And then if you look at Schedule D, the nuance there now from the 98.99 is also in that only certain collection rates at this stage will make a difference when it comes to the mill rate, because as Frank had mentioned earlier, you can only go so many decimal places out when making that adjustment. So that would be why if you did it at 98.99 right now, in order to get to the 2790 and the 1.42, you actually would need to move it to 99.01 at this point. So otherwise, you're sitting at 98.97. So it only moves the needle when you move to a certain point at where we are right now. But exactly, once everything is settled in at this stage.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments, questions? Mr. Walsh, Mr. Curley, okay.
I was going to move on to the fund balance piece. Last year we were at 11.76, and I want to make sure we're okay there, but I don't want to move to that topic unless we're done with the collection rate.
Are there other questions or on the collection rate? Mr. Walsh.
I would just like to say that when we voted on that sense of the body, I just took it just as a sense of the body. It seems to have transgressed into almost like it was a vote of the body. I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about. It should have been what the Board of Selectmen passed on to us up until today. I mean, we could have senses of the body and talk about all sorts of things, but this, this 98.99 seems to have transgressed, and I'm going to have to be a lot clearer on these senses of the bodies, or just not vote on them, because yeah, that night I was thinking about it, but I've thought about a lot of other things since that point. And it should have been talked about at our meeting during the budget, that it was still at 99.07, which is what the Board of Selectmen voted on. And that's what it should have been stayed as discussed. And getting to this 1.42, it shouldn't have been 1.42 that we put out to the public. It should have been based on the 99.07, which would have made it lower. So I just want to state that for the record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other comments from the board on this?
Just,
Early, you have another? Mhm.
Do we want to move on off
can
the
I-
collection rate, or?
I just have another, just want to
No,
follow up on one thing, Mr.
Sure.
brought up. I just happened to notice 99.07 isn't even on our sheet. I'm just curious about that myself, since that was what the Board of Selectmen approved.
So if you were, right, so if you look at column 2 on Schedule D, right, I've numbered them. So if you look at column 2 and you look at the boxed in mill rate of 27.90, the next place that you could go, because you can't go out to a 6 decimal place, the next place you could only go is 27.91. Going back, the only place you could go is 27.89.
27.89, gotcha, okay.
So
thanks,
if you
Frank.
had 99.07, you'd be somewhere between those numbers, which you need another decimal place, which doesn't exist. So these are the only collection rates that are available, is the terminology I would use.
So in essence, you're saying, Frank, if I understand, we'd have to either arrive at 27.89, correct, or 27.88. Is that, am I following that correctly?
I mean, I don't think you have to arrive anywhere. It's just if you felt that the collection rate should be higher, then, you have the options that I laid before you are the 99.05, 99.08, and 99.12.
Gotcha. Okay.
Those are the 3 options.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Frank.
No problem.
Thank you. Can I ask a question, Frank? These numbers are, I mean, we're talking about very small differentials here. What difference does this make, do you know, to the taxpayer? I mean, if we're at 99.01 versus 99.05, we're talking about a $120,000 difference on a $65 million budget. I mean, is this
Yes.
like a nickel to the average taxpayer, or what is
Yeah,
it?
it would be, I mean, if you assume the assessed value of somebody's home, it would be, a smaller amount. And every, if you go from
When you say
27.
smaller amount, though, that's what I'm trying to understand. I don't want to, wring our hands over this too much if we're literally talking about a dollar.
It'd probably be, I would imagine it'd be less than a dollar.
Less than a dollar. It would be $120,000 spread over every taxpayer in this town, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And the 99.01 is just to clarify, is the basis for your recommendation here? I know I assume you were trying to back into the 1.42, but that number, 99.01, is the rate out of the available scenarios here that most closely aligns with the 5-year average that you've presented, right? So is that the other
Yes.
part of the basis? Okay.
Yeah, so that's a piece of it. And also the mill rate, right? Everybody focuses on the tax rate increase, but the mill rate was 27.90 that both boards. So that was the mill rate when people voted that they voted on. So as far as the RTM, and you guys went in, the bottom line was 27.90. That was the assumed mill rate. So that was also my leading factor, not just the increase.
I mean,
it was
I just
assumed.
want to reiterate, just to follow up on Mr. Walsh's point, no one votes on a mill rate or a collection rate until right now. So whatever the Board of Selectmen did, those were just assumptions that people discussed, the sense of the body we took. These were just assumptions we discussed for purposes of communicating to the public where we were in the process. So, they voted on a total appropriation. And we voted on a total appropriation and total revenue. So, and those amounts that we voted on come out to these calculations. So, So again, your recommendation is 99.01, which would give us a mill rate of 27.9, a 1.42% increase, which is the equivalent to the 5-year average, consistent with what has been discussed with the public thus far over the past
Correct.
month or
Yes.
two. Okay.
Yep.
Ms. Ruggiero.
Just want to understand, when we look at this 1.42% increase, if you're taking it down 120,000, going to the 99.05, why does it show such a drop for, it looks like the increase would go down to 1.38? How does that equate to only $1 per person?
1.38. So I know, so if you took $120,000, I mean, I just calculated by taking just take $120,000 divided by the, whatever what is it, 12 billion of assessed value. Well, my calculator doesn't even go that far. But if you just take that, if you just take the 120,000 and divide it by all the assessed value in the town, you're going to get to a number that's less than a dollar.
But the tax rate increase would be 1.38? Am I following the chart correctly?
Yes, yeah, it would be 1.38. 1.38%.
Thank you, Ms. Ruggiero. Other questions? Mr. Curley, did you have a question on this?
Not on the collection rate. I had a question about the fund balance.
Okay, and does that have to do with this vote?
Well, to the extent that I just want to make sure that the actions that we take are following our policy of doing no harm. And I'm not clear that we're maintaining our fund balance at the 11.75 or 11.76% rate from last year. I just needed help following the numbers to make sure that we are not reducing that fund balance.
Yeah, I can turn that over to Frank, but that's really a function of if we budget for surplus or not versus what collection rate we end up. But Frank, can you explain the fund balance number for everyone?
Yeah, so right now, let me just pull up the schedule. So right now, FY23, you're at 11.76, 41 million. FY24, nothing you do tonight would impact the fund balance because fiscal year 23 we're good. Fiscal year 24 has yet to be closed, and there are available funds either in the prior year surplus or the current year surplus where you could do that. If you wanted to budget surplus in the budget, you could do what was done last year, which is budget and contribution of surplus in the general fund, or you could go with a very low collection rate to create a surplus. But I just think based on past practice of using the surpluses to contribute to that, I think you'd be fine on the hold harmless policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other comments or questions? Okay. Mr. Testani.
Before we.
Certainly.
We're about to take a vote on the mill rate. Before we do that, I'd like to make a comment on it, if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay, so I honestly can't, in my conscience, vote for any kind of a tax increase that's going to amount to 1.42% for taxpayers. I can't. I mean, somebody has to talk about the fact that, yes, $1 might make a difference for people. There's people on fixed incomes. There's seniors in this town. There are people on limited incomes. There are people that are going to be severely impacted by what's going to amount to an astronomical tax increase that's a result of this budget. And I think that most people voted in this town. I don't think we're aware of the kind of taxes that this budget is going to result in. And I honestly think that people are going to be severely impacted by it. I think that every dollar counts for most people in this age of high inflation we're living in, and the fact that most people can't afford it. To add randomly add $100,000 that was approved by party line vote on the RTM to an already inflated budget for what? For, let's see, a potential new charter for this town. For those that don't know, I lived in the town of Trumbull for 30 years. We formed a charter commission without an attorney. We've passed a new budget, new charter, new everything. No attorneys were involved. Didn't cost the town $100,000. So, and for those that don't know, there's quite a few woke items in that charter revision proposal. And
Okay, I just,
most fair.
we're not litigating the
No,
budget right now.
I'm commenting on why I'm going to vote against this mill rate increase. I
you
think
can
it's,
wrap it up.
I think it's an insult. I'm not going to wrap it up. I'm going to talk as long as I want. And
As long as it's pertinent to the voting
it
item,
is,
Mr.
pertinent.
Testa.
It certainly is
No,
pertinent.
we're not
because
litigating the budget.
I'm commenting on the charter revision and why I don't think spending another $100,000 to an already inflated budget was necessary. And I'd be willing to bet if you stop most seniors and most people on limited income, they would say $100,000 for what? I'm sorry. Can you help me to understand why my taxes are going up? Can you help me to understand why it's going to be hard for me to pay my mortgage this month? Can you help me to understand why it's going to be hard for me to afford to go to the grocery store? That's what I hear. So I'm sorry if all of you can be good with passing a massive tax increase on to Fairfield residents, go for it. But I'm voting against this, like I voted
Thank you,
against the
Mr.
budget.
Testani.
Thank you.
Got it. Mr. Penley.
I've sat through a lot of these meetings and heard a lot of comments about, let's save the taxpayer some money. Let's save the taxpayer some money. If you want to save the taxpayer some money, you have to talk about making reductions that are bigger than $100,000. And I think we all know that. You have to talk about making reductions that are bigger than a few $100,000. Our budget, where it is right now, $360 million, $336 million. If you want to take a basis point off the mill rate, you have to reduce it by $1.2 million. $1.2 million. So these little amounts, they don't mean anything to people. And this speech doesn't make sense to me. Because when we went through the budget process, I didn't hear you make any amendments, Jack, that were meaningful in terms of amount. They weren't going to save anybody money. So, I mean, it's hard to hear you say that without anything behind it.
I actually voted to decrease.
Can I just?
No, I'm going to
No.
respond since he.
No, you're not, Jack. You're out of order.
He invoked my name.
Wait
He
until you're
invoked my name.
recognized.
He invoked
I don't
my
know
name,
if he's
and I
finished.
get a chance to
No,
respond.
you do not get a chance
Really?
to
Okay,
respond.
is that how it goes? Are we in a
You can wait till you're
totalitarian?
recognized.
Are we in a totalitarian state now?
Are you
Is fair?
done?
Are we in
Yes, I'm a
totalitarianism?
Totalitarian, Jack.
Well, that's why you're
Are you
running this
done?
meeting. Is
You're
that
done?
what you're doing?
Okay. Mr. Matola, do you have a comment?
Yeah, briefly. I mean, I didn't think we were going to get into this tonight, but just a couple of things so the public understands what this budget is about. First of all, the actual monetary increase in this budget is totally in line with what's happened over the last 5 years. A budget that I believe some people across the aisle voted on happily. And so the idea that this is a massive tax increase is just a false statement. The other issue is the reason why the mill rate is a little higher this year around is because the grand list didn't grow as much under the last administration, their last year in office. So I don't know why, but it didn't, and that affects the mill rate. So take a look at the numbers. This increase is in line with the increases we've had over the last several years. It funds our required necessities, things that we have to fund. It's amazing, this budget actually is, because it's also funding large increases in collective bargaining agreements negotiated by the last administration. At least some of them were negotiated. One of them had to go through arbitration, which cost the taxpayer a ton of money because the last administration wasn't capable of reaching a deal with a particular union. And so I think the people of Fairfield are smart enough to understand that this is not a large, massive tax increase as it's been portrayed by certain people, that it's in line with past spending, and it's a very responsible budget. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to everyone. Mr. Walsh.
John, I disagree with you in regards to that fire contract. It would have cost the town $25 million if we gave it to them on everything. It would have. It just would have, which is the legal fees were not $25 million. They weren't even close to that. So I'm not, well, I'm just telling you, it was $25 million that fire contract, if we went with what they wanted. It just was. It was $25 million increase in the budget. Didn't happen. Thank God for the taxpayers. Mr. Penley, I disagree with your comment in the following. You say that we would have to have made drastic changes. I did the calculation. So if every one of the cuts was accepted the night of the budget that we made on our side of the aisle, plus we used the first selectmen's, or the Board of Selectmen, excuse me, mill rate. I did the calculation. The mill rate would have gone up to 1.15%. So 1.15 versus 1.42, I just did the calculations, 20% savings. So it does matter, and cuts do matter. I'm just telling you, they do. So it's 20% savings in the increase. So that's one thing. A couple other things I just wanted to point out was, and I don't know what the rate's going to be. So I'm going to wait for some of my comments because I don't know where we're going and where everybody's going to where we're making the motion. Because currently, if I'm not mistaken, there's no mill rate increase on the table to vote on, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm going to hold back some of those comments because I don't know where they are. But I do want to save the taxpayers some money. I mean, the expense increase in this budget's $12,933,516, which was a 3.63% in expenses. So that's what it is. It's a lot of money. So I'm going to listen to see what everybody else wants to do. I'll weigh in when I want to on that, but I just wanted to make a few comments. Thank you.
Mr. Curley.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I think everybody on both sides of the table here have made reasonable points to an extent. I don't agree that this is an outlandish or an extravagant budget increase. I think to the extent that where we land at 1.42, 1.38, 1.5, anywhere in there in terms of an increase to the taxpayer, people have to understand that the town is subject to inflation as well. A good portion of our budget goes to salaries for teachers, for firefighters, for police, and they're getting raises, whether it's due to the contracts from the previous administration or the arbitration, but they're getting increases. And the goods and services, materials that the town has to pay for, also subject to inflation. So I'm not tone deaf to the fact that we are trying to be fiscally responsible and prudent as we try and evaluate these budgets. But at the end of the day, to try and suggest that we should have a 0% increase in our year-over-year budget, that would require a $6 million cut. And with all due respect, Mr. Walsh, I did not see $6 million worth of cuts proposed by anybody on this board collectively. So I think it's a little bit outlandish to think that we're going to try and keep this budget to a 0% increase, especially when the two major contracts that were settled in this last go-around. The other thing that I think is really important to understand is not looking back at the previous administration, but looking back at the administration before that, under Mr. Tetreault. This town ran very thin for a long time, and it was because the purse strings were held very tight. And one of the things that the prior administration had to deal with, and they had a tough time with it, is that there was a tremendous amount of deferred maintenance in town facilities and other town departments. It was run really, really thin. And guess what? That ended up costing the taxpayer more in the long run, because whether it's the air conditioning for the schools or the buildings that were run into disrepair, the more we kick the can on some of this stuff, the more we end up costing the taxpayer in the long run. So at the end of the day, if you look at a 1.42% plus or minus a few basis points here or there, wherever we decide tonight, in comparison to a 3.5% inflation rate, I think that the taxpayer in Fairfield's doing pretty well, to the extent that their tax rates are going up less than inflation, perhaps less than half of the rate of inflation. So I'm proud of the work that we did. I really think that we all scrubbed this budget when it was submitted to us. We turned a lot of pages. We made 70 some odd motions and votes on changes to the budget. So this was not a rubber stamp by any stretch. And there were motions to cut that were made on both sides of the table and bipartisan, accepted on both sides. So I think we did a really good job. I'm looking forward to putting the end to this process. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's irresponsible to say that wherever we settle on the mill rate is an extravagant or outlandish increase to taxes, because I just think that's a false statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Anyone else? I do want to get back to the motion, which we're, setting the mill rate here. And I know there's been some overall comments on the budget. I have one myself, but anyone else? Mr. Gerber?
I'd like to assume that everyone has pulled up past budgets and compared this budget to past budgets, because I just pulled up them. We've all looked at them before. 21-22, the expenses increased 15,163,872. That was a 4.78% increase. Did we have this conversation that year? 22-23 increased 12,758,411, 3.84% increase. Did we have this conversation that year? So if you're looking at mill rates, and I said this at the RTM meeting, and you don't like the mill rate increase, when we do the appraised value, the reappraisals, when property values go up by 30%, and I drop the mill rate, the people yelling and screaming here, are they going to take me out on a vacation to any country I want? Are you going to vote for me again? Are you going to slap me on the back and say I'm a genius? I mean, let's just be mature about this. That's really what I would hope.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gerber. Mr. Walsh?
Mr. Gerber, I think actually you were right the other night, that we shouldn't look at it as an increase, and that we should really almost solely look at it as what the percentage of expense increase is. Because there's a tendency when we get income in, like this year's, what was it, an increase in the interest income by almost $5 million? That was new fresh cash, right? You would think that when you got $5 million of fresh cash, at least this is what I was thinking, that you would actually, that's the taxpayers' money, because it's the taxpayers' investment. All that money is being invested on behalf of the taxpayers, and they're making a windfall, $5 million. That maybe the tax rate would actually be lower. Now, I understand. I don't think I'm an unintelligent person. I understand that there's a 4% increase in the Board of Ed teacher's contract. I understand what that did. And I don't think, and I also actually, Mr. Curley, kind of agreed with you when you just spoke just a little while ago. I just think that we're not way off on our thinking. It's 1.42 versus closer to 1.1. I wish it could be at 1, but it can't. I was hoping it could be at 1, with $5 million of fresh infusion of interest. What scares the hell out of me, though, is when interest rates change and we lose the $5 million and we start going back down to more regular numbers. Doesn't look like it's going to happen for a while now. I mean, the Fed just keeps putting off these rate changes over and over. So we're actually going to probably make more on the interest than we thought we were going to make over a longer period of time. I think those are things that I look at that concern me. But I believe you're correct in that we should be focusing on the expense increase. And we should then start looking at the revenue increase and wonder why we're not driving taxes to a lower number. And that's just kind of where I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Yeah, I'm just going to make one comment. I agree with you, but I don't. The fresh cash, I mean, we got investment income because interest rates were higher. Interest rates were higher because of inflation. Inflation is what drove that teacher's contract and these other higher expenses. Inflation is not good for a budget. It did not give this town a windfall. It put a higher revenue number in one line item, and you're right. There's going to be some risk there because there's a mismatch now where maybe interest rates go down, but we're stuck with a longer-term collective bargaining agreement that has fixed increases in it. But I don't see that as fresh money. I see it as an offset to all the higher costs that are embedded across the board in this budget, number one. Number two, I will just say, I didn't forget the lessons of a few years ago when we had COVID, and we did a lot of unnatural things to get to a 0% increase. In retrospect, I think they were foolish because we paid for them the following year. We had a 0% increase one year, and the next year it was almost 5% in terms of actual impact on taxpayers. We didn't talk about it that way because we looked at the mill rate and it was in the middle of a reval, but we doubled this rate of spending the following year. We could have gotten to zero this year. Your 5 or 6 million, I'll tell you how to get there. You could cut teachers. You could cut police officers. We could not pave our roads. Okay, there's a lot of ways to cut $5 or $6 million out of this budget. Nobody at this table proposed them because, frankly, I don't think any of us believe that those were the right things to do.
Oh, well, hold on. I did.
Well,
and I'll tell you, I said it into a room during the negotiation. I'm like, we'll give them the 4% because if we go to arbitration, it's going to be more.
Well,
but you know
okay,
what?
but
They should look at their things, and teachers should be cut.
Okay, what I did not hear, I heard a proposal to cut $250,000 from the education budget. I wasn't hearing cuts of $5 or $6 million. So when we say we don't want to vote for a tax increase, I just think we have to be realistic because the reality is we have increases built into this budget. And yes, we've got some interest income this year to offset it, which is why we're down to 1.4% instead of at a 3.5% increase or a 4% increase. So, but I feel like we're getting off track here and we are relitigating the budget, which is done and it's all voted on. And all we're supposed to be doing here right now is setting the mill rate based on the budget that's already done. So in my mind, listen, we can monkey around with the collection rate to try and move this, a few pennies here or there. Historically, I think this board has acted responsibly. We've, not been, we've not tried to be overly conservative. We've tried to play it straight down the middle, pick a number that made sense based on history, recognizing that we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with this economy. Inflation is apparently stickier than anyone thought it was going to be. We don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. We don't know what's going to happen with our expenses. We don't know what's going to happen with our tax collection rate, employment, any of that stuff. So, and I think we've talked about that. We've talked about the fact that we shouldn't be in the business of trying to project those things. We should just try and do what's reasonable based on the data in front of us. So we haven't gotten there yet, but I think a fair starting place in terms of the motion to set the mill rate is probably what's been proposed because it's a 5-year average. It's down the middle. I think we have uncertainties in this budget on both sides. we may get some more interest income. We may get less conveyance tax. We may get higher energy costs. We may get higher expenses across the board in other things. I don't know what that's going to be. But, given this environment and how uncertain things are, to me, I think the proposal that's in front of us is a responsible one. And we know, because we lived it a couple of years ago, that when we try to squeeze this thing down artificially, all we do is pay the price the next year. And we've been through that, so.
Mr. Charlton, can I get a data point from our CFO? We were looking at a fairly large surplus at our last quarterly. Has anything changed that you know of or have heard of in the town that is going to change that dramatically come our next quarterly?
Nothing substantive.
Excellent. So that means we're going to have another fairly large surplus. And, the first selectman, I listened to him the other night at the RTM meeting. He doesn't like surpluses. Thinks the surpluses are really just taking too much money from the taxpayer. So what we should really be thinking about, one of the data points is, with that large of a surplus, and knowing that it will be for next year by the time we figure that out, we could move some of that surplus into a line to make up if we're wrong on the tax collection rate. So I would try to suggest that we should go as low as possible to the lowest number, because we know already, number one, our fund balance is where it is and it's healthy right now, and that we should be knowing what we do and the information that we have before us, we should be going to the lowest number on the sheet. I'm just telling you, that's where I am going, because I know we have a pile of cash, pile of it. And we've considered, we've had it year after year. And those are things, as you know.
And we've utilized 2 million of it in this budget already, as everyone knows. Right.
Okay, but we still have.
You're saying
And we have.
the lowest, when you're saying the lowest, you're saying,
Okay.
okay.
And this board knows, we've had conversations here about that capital projects list. And what we've got in front of us at the WPCA and at schools and everything else, which is where that surplus has historically gone. So that's not going to go away. So if we start putting surplus, ahead of time into the mill rate, again, we're just going to, now we're going to bond for it on the back end with higher capital. So.
But as you know, it's not even that much money to get from one to the other. It's not even that much money.
Well,
you would need out of that. You just wouldn't need it. So once again, we're potentially.
But then what's the point, Jim?
The point is, and through you, Madam Chairwoman, I would like Frank to, if you don't mind, work with the tax collector and figure out for me under all three, the highest and lowest of these numbers and the middle. So the 9 point, let's see, what the actual cost is for the median taxpayer for making these changes. And I actually think that should be a new number that we include on Schedule
D, Jim?
Schedule D.
Yeah.
I'd like for the median taxpayer, what is the difference going to make from these tax increase numbers?
Frank, do you have that information available? Do you know the median assessment? I think obviously we have a disproportionate amount of our grand list is businesses, right? So are you talking about just for?
Yeah, so you'd have to.
Homeowners? Okay.
Yes.
Have to look at the residential only property, which I'd have to get from the assessor. I'll just clarify, it's kind of going
I
back.
don't need it tonight. I would just like to see it, and I think it would be a good thing.
That's
for us all
reasonable, yeah.
And now it would be a good thing for us in the future to have a 6th column on here and to show the effect of what it's going to do to the median residential taxpayer.
Okay.
I'm just going to clarify, because I don't want to give people the wrong number. I still don't consider it a big amount, but if you assume, a $650,000 house and $120,000, it would be $6.97. I was thinking about per dollar of assessed value, less than $1, so $6.90.
Okay.
On 650,000.
Mr. Curley?
Yeah, so I think there's probably an easy way to think about this. So if we look at Schedule D and we look just at the tax increases in column 3, right? So whether we are going up 1.42% or 1.38%, that 4 basis points for, if we say that the median, mean, average, however we want to define it, if someone's paying $10,000 in taxes, which might be the average, the difference of 4 basis points is $4. So that's, if you're thinking in $10,000 increments, which I think is in the spirit of what you're thinking about, Jim, in terms of what it means to the taxpayer, the difference on these line items is roughly $3 or $4 per line. Not a big dollar.
Can I suggest anyone wants to make a motion? Here, Mr. Mottola?
So I'll make a motion to set the mill rate as set forth in Schedule D, scenario number 4, so with a collection rate of 99.01%, 27.90 mill rate. That's an increase of 1.42%. So I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Curley? All right. Any further discussion? Mr. Walsh?
I'd like to make an amendment to that motion that it be 99.12 collection rate and that the mill rate be the 27.87.
Second on that amendment? Ms. Ruggiero? Discussion? Anyone? Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to point out, so 99.12. Okay. No discussion? Okay. So why don't we vote on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment to use a collection rate of 99.12, which would set the mill rate at 27.87. Mr. Testani, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Walsh, Ms. LeClaire. Okay. Opposed? Mr. Penley, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark. Okay. The motion fails. So back to the original motion. Any further discussion on that? Okay, so let's vote on the original then to set the mill rate at a mill of 27.90. That's assuming a collection rate of 99.01%. All in favor? Mr. Penley, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark. Opposed? Mr. Testani, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Walsh, Ms. LeClaire. Okay, the motion passes 5-4, and the mill rate is set at 27.90. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we're going to move on to item 5. To hear and discuss an update from the town's internal auditor related to audits completed during the period January 1 through December 31, 2023. This item is continued from the March 5th, 2024 meeting. Board members will recall, and also for the benefit of the public, during our March 5th meeting, we had a presentation from Ms. Saxel on the audits for 2023. There were 6 of them that we didn't get to that evening. So those 6 are those that we are going to be discussing tonight. The backup for this item, those 6 audits for calendar 2023, the materials begin on page 19 of the backup. So Ms. Saxel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, everyone. So as Ms. Charlton said, I will be discussing the remaining 6 internal audits tonight that we did not have an opportunity to discuss at the March Board of Finance meeting. And I understand that there is a lot of information in these reports. I'll give a brief background on each audit. And although all of the findings and recommendations made within these reports are important, I will elaborate on the most important ones. And please feel free to ask any questions that you may have after my recap of each audit. The first is an audit of the departmental petty cash and change funds. 23 town departments maintained either a petty cash fund, change fund, or both. Internal audit confirmed the petty cash change fund amounts with each department head as of April 24th, 2023. It was recommended that management conduct a review of the annual monetary need for each departmental petty cash fund And the departments who have not utilized their fund within the last 3 years should return them back to the town. If the petty cash funds are deemed necessary and appropriate for the department, then management should increase the size, i.e., the dollar amount of the fund authorized to cover the annual need for the department as evidenced by the department replenishments that exceeded the initial fund amount. If the petty cash funds are not deemed necessary by management, then eliminate the funds. Municipal credit card, pink voucher, and purchase requisition purchase order options are available to departments for the procurement of goods and services. A wide variety of purchases were also noted during the audit as being made with departmental petty cash funds. They included office and departmental supplies, license and membership renewals, food purchases, seasonal decorations, high-octane gasoline purchases, etc. If management wishes departments to maintain these petty cash funds, then it is recommended that the petty cash policy be updated to include a standardized list of approved and acceptable purchases that these departments must abide by. It was also noted that town departments are allowed to accept and maintain donation funds, and petty cash purchases are expensed to departmental donation fund accounts. Written statements from departments regarding the purpose, intent, and use of donation funds could not be located. Therefore, it could not be determined if the use of petty cash for purchases, which were later charged to donation expense accounts, were in accordance with the purpose and intent of the donation fund. The donation fund policy should be updated and it should be redistributed to the applicable departments for their information and understanding. Further, departments should provide updated statements to the Chief Fiscal Officer defining the purpose and intent of the collection and use of donation funds to be maintained on file and finance. Donation funds should be used to carry out the mission of the department and should be spent toward the public good and benefit. Follow-up. Upon the recommendation of the Audit Subcommittee, both the Recreation and Fire Training Center petty cash funds, which were internal checking accounts, were closed early this year. The two departments have returned their funds back to the Finance Department, and the funds were redeposited back into the general fund. And further, a donation fund audit is scheduled to take place within the next few months. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Connie. Questions? Mr. Testani?
Thanks. Hi, Connie. I promise this will be a lot more calm than earlier. So just out of my own curiosity's sake, are there any petty cash funds left after?
Yes, there.
Just the essential ones you spoke of.
Yes, they're maintained in various departments throughout town. There is a list in the audit report on page 5.
Okay.
Yes.
I saw.
So there are a few.
Didn't know if that changed
Yes.
so far.
No, there still are some out there.
And just on my own curiosity's sake, because I couldn't help but notice that there was a bagpiper. Just wondered what that happened before.
Yes, that was, I believe that was the police department. It could have been related to either a retirement or a person who had passed.
And out of the remaining charges and stuff, it sounds like for the most part, everything was rectified. Would you agree with that? Am I?
When you say rectified?
Well, in other words, what needed to be returned was, right? Did I understand that right?
Sorry, couldn't
Well,
clarify.
so in other words, you mentioned your conclusion at the end. It seemed as though you were pleased with what transpired in terms of the departments, especially the donation pieces from recreation, was it? And one other, I believe?
Yes, all of the departments were definitely amenable and accommodating during the audit. There was backup associated with every expenditure. However, we don't have clear-cut guidelines as to the use of the petty cash funds, and I'd like that to be defined in a policy and distributed to the departments. And either perhaps maybe these funds are not necessary anymore since we have other means of procuring goods and services.
Well, as part of our backup tonight, we got this petty cash and change fund policies and procedures.
Yes.
Does that need to be revised?
I had updated that policy, and if management wishes to use it, that is an option for them. to use the policy.
You're saying it's not being used as of now, is that right?
We are currently using an older version of that policy.
Not one that you authored.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. Other questions? Mr. Walsh.
Ms. Sachs, so what is this? I mean, one of the larger numbers on here is this Police Department Detective Bureau, $3,000 petty cash fund.
Yes.
Is that for investigations where they're like trying to like give people money to buy drugs to like, you know, and then see whether they take the money and then slap cuffs on them and then they take their money back? Or how's that? Is that what that's for?
Well, the initial fund amounts are determined by the department head, and the uses of the funds are for department-related purposes. So if it was for the Detective Bureau, it would be definitely for Detective Bureau investigations and other departmental expenses.
I just want to make sure it's not, you know, for other things. And so it's for, that's probably what it's for, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And have they defined that to you? Have they given you what their uses are?
Well, when I was reviewing the expenses, I could see what they were purchasing, and it was departmental supplies. Sometimes it was for classes, memberships, various. There were a wide variety of types of expenditures.
And these are outside the normal purchasing policy things?
Yes, they are not done through pink voucher or purchase order or credit card.
And why was that not happening?
Initially, the petty cash funds were established for convenience for the department as an, if they had to make an emergency purchase, if they,
Okay.
but it seems like now it's kind of taken the place a little bit of the pink voucher policy, the, you know, and other means of procuring goods and services. So I would like to see the policy defined in a clearer manner and redistributed to the department heads.
Yeah, it just seems like it's, I presumed it was all for work stuff like.
Oh, yeah, yes, it
What-
is all work
No, no,
related.
no,
It's
I'm
all
sorry, I'm
department
sorry.
related.
Maybe I'm not being clear. Matter of fact, I'm not being clear. I presumed it was for things like I just spoke to you about. $3,000 in the detective department was for using money to try to see whether someone's committing a crime. I did not know that it was for buying department supplies. Like you could take $500 out, buy an iPad that you might need for your job, and then what? Expense it and get the $500 replaced in the petty cash fund? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
Why
If
wouldn't they,
they made
why
a
wouldn't they go through the normal purchasing like
think
like
it was
the
a
rest
matter
of
of-
like the
Can I,
rest of the
yeah,
like the
Mr.
rest of the
Walsh, you
department?
hit on the important, but I think, and maybe, I don't know if Mr. Becker or Mr. Gerber have an update. When the audit committee heard this, just to update everyone, I think we generally had the opinion that these petty cash funds were a relic of the past. We have credit cards now. Really not clear why we need to have cash in various departments. I think I heard one example of where we needed cash for sure, which was emissions testing.
Correct. Yeah, there are some instances where
Yeah,
only
very-
cash is accepted. For example, a $20.
Right, but that's not petty
emissions
cash.
test.
Yeah, so very limited. So I think the question becomes, do we put out a new policy and continue to implement a policy for what is now very small amounts? So over 3 years, we had $42,000 of replenishments, and 35,000 of the 42 was for 2 accounts that have been closed. So $7,000 over 3 years. My personal opinion was to write policies and to come up with a whole thing to deal with that small amount of money didn't seem logical. Seems like we should just swipe a credit card, and if we need $10 for emissions or something, we can figure that out. So I think where we left it was that we hoped to see, you know, a rethinking of whether we should have petty cash funds at all. And I don't know if there's been an update on that, but.
The only comment about the credit card piece and that we have slowly been over time reducing the number of cards is that we, before we just pull the rug out on that piece, we want to try to actually get the credit card any other accounts where people can charge things automatically. We talked about local stores and some things like that, which purchasing's working on. And once we get that in better shape where there's more places people can just go and put something right on account, or a better clearer lines when it comes to the credit card piece, then yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you're still looking at it.
That.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, the idea that someone takes time out of their day to like drive to Staples and spend $20 on supplies, it doesn't seem like a good or efficient use of people's time. And it just seems like a very antiquated, old process. And so looks like you're still working on it, but I would just reiterate, rather than maybe formulating a whole new policy, it would be helpful. Or that's where we left it anyway. So the administration's looking at, can we do away with this whole
Okay, I
thing?
mean, I'm not saying that I'd be against it if it's for investigative purposes for our detective bureau, for like drug, purchasing drug, trying to purchase drugs for an investigation, trying to like see whether you could bribe somebody with cash. Prostitution
That's been
investigations.
zero,
There's
though.
There's
Yeah.
all sorts of things that you might need cash for as a police detective. So I just, I guess, I don't know if that's in another account that they use or whether that's in the petty cash fund. Do you know?
Well, those funds are available for those purposes if the department needs it, but they are also using it for the other purposes as well.
Yeah, and you can see that for the Detective Bureau, for example, the last couple of years, there hasn't been any replenishment. So, okay. If there's no other questions, we can move to the next audit.
Thank you. The next audit is the audit of the tax collector revenue collections, refunds, internal controls, and departmental operations. The tax collector receives and processes customer tax payments over the counter and by mail. These payments are entered into the cashiering system. Other tax payment methods include online credit card payments, electronic fund transfers, ACH deposits. For fiscal year 2023, the tax collector received almost $319.5 million in tax collections. The tax collector's office is secured by various in-office alarm security systems, which are directly linked to the police department. Due to the nature and volume of revenue collections by the tax collector's office on a daily basis, Internal Audit conducted a test on August 29, 2023, of the in-office security systems to ensure that they were properly functioning. The test revealed that 40% of the security systems were non-functioning. Further, the staff at the tax office had a false sense of security as they were not aware that the security systems in place were non-functioning. Conversations with staff at the tax office revealed that they were uncertain as to the proper use of the security systems in place in case there happened to be an actual emergency situation. The supervisor of building maintenance was immediately contacted and a service request was made for the repair of the security system. The staff was then educated in the proper use of the security system. It is further recommended that routine testing of all security systems in the tax collector's office be performed on an annual basis to ensure that they are properly functioning. This will ensure the safety and security of both town personnel and assets. Follow-up. The security company made the necessary repairs on the security system at the tax office in late November, early December 2023, and the staff was educated in the use of the security system. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Well,
Mr. Walsh?
does the tax office take cash in?
Yes, they do.
How much do they average on a daily basis during the busy season?
Well, of course, it varies depending on if it's a collection
Yeah,
month or not. I'd rather not say in a public forum, it's high numbers during a collection month.
Okay. And do we have security during those months?
Yes. Well, we have security system. We
Do we
don't
like
have an officer in the,
Or a security guard or anything?
no, we do not have a security
Despite the
guard.
fact that there's heavy amounts of cash coming in?
Correct. We have an in-office security system in place. That's it.
That's the buzzers or whatever that is. The
Yeah.
system you're talking about.
Yes.
That doesn't work.
Well, it's working now.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it work, like, do they test it regularly now?
Well, I just went in August and it was recently fixed in November, so hopefully every few months it should be tested just to make sure it is properly functioning.
Well, it should be definitely tested in before July 1st, right?
Yes,
Okay, all right. Do we have cameras monitoring like
Yes.
who's coming in and who's coming
Yes.
out of the tax office?
there's a camera system in place and it videotapes everything that goes on in the office.
Is that done on the cloud or is it just done on a videotape?
It's not actually videotaped. I believe it is in the cloud.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next one.
The next one, audit review of bid awards 2018-26, garbage pickup, 2021-30, leaf pickup, contracted property services, and other contracts. A review of a random sample of payments made to vendors which required bids per town charter as evidenced within the contracted property service accounts in Munis for all departments during fiscal year 2023 was conducted. It was noted that invoices paid under bid award 2018-26 for refuse removal showed an overpayment totaling $26,301. Another contract under bid 2023-143 revealed that a vendor had used incorrect rates and service locations, resulting in an overpayment of $2,656.04. Follow-up. These vendors were promptly contacted and credits for the overpayments were applied to future invoices. Other findings noted. Bid 2016-07, special waste hauling. The town continued to honor and pay invoices on a 13-year-old bid. Bid 2024-05, tree trimming. Did not include pricing for specific bid categories for essential work needed and paid for on invoices. Bid 2020-98 for sewer pipe root control invoices. Did not agree to the bid, and it was uncertain if a cost of living adjustment had been applied. One DPW contract, which called for a specific CPI index to be used to calculate monthly trash hauling fees on invoices, was not known by either purchasing or DPW, and therefore verification of invoice pricing could not be double-checked by the department. The annual CPI index used on invoices submitted to the town for payment had to be obtained from the vendor after requested by internal audit. It is further recommended that the Department of Public Works assign one person to be a contract manager within the department, whose primary responsibility is reviewing and cross-referencing invoices to bid awards to ensure that the correct pricing is reflected on them. This will ensure that the town is properly paying the correct amounts owed to the vendor. Further conversations with the department head and audit subcommittee suggested that the position would perhaps better be suited in the purchasing department, so they may review all department bid awards, CPI adjustments, and cross-reference to purchase orders and invoices. It should be noted that Public Works Operations already had a contract manager position dedicated to the review of contracts, bids, and invoices from July 1995 through January 2021. However, the department did not request to fill the position in the FY22 budget upon the retirement of the former employee. Instead, a DPW finance position was approved in the FY22 budget under DPW administration. However, that position was never filled either. Ultimately, a financial analyst position was filled in lieu of the DPW finance position. It is recommended that all bid awards that authorize annual cost of living adjustments be tracked by bid number, vendor, and date of authorized cost of living adjustment by the purchasing department. All cost of living adjustments authorized to vendors by the purchasing department should be communicated with the applicable department heads so they are aware of them and may monitor and audit invoices for proper pricing prior to payment. Several other audit recommendations were also made within the report in an effort to streamline the documentation surrounding the awarding of bids, the relaying of bid award information to departments, and the department cross-referencing of awarded bid pricing to vendor invoices to ensure that the town is properly paying the correct amounts on all vendor invoices. Follow-up. The purchasing department has implemented departmental procedures to track the status of bids in terms of renewals and are looking into purchasing the Munis Contract Management Module. The cost of this Munis module is $10,000, and it will eliminate the current manual tracking system in place.
Thank you. Questions on this audit?
You almost made the $10,000 in this finding
That's true.
alone. Imagine if we had two of you. How much
Well,
money
there
we-
used to be,
how
there
much
used to
money
be
we'd
two
save.
auditors, believe
Yeah.
it or not.
Should give you a bonus, a third of what you collect.
Imagine what I'd find then. No.
I know. I was thinking that.
Good answer, Connie.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, usually when there's one, there's more. I don't think we can ever assume that when we do this kind of work, what we found is an isolated incident. So this gets back to the issue of having a contract management system and looking at the controls in place in our purchasing and finance departments.
The next audit was audit of senior center program revenue. It was noted during the course of the audit that an actual report from My Active Center, the software used by the senior center for managing customer data, program and class registration and payments, was not fully utilized to reconcile to customer cash and cash receipts on hand, nor was My Active Center report submitted as backup to support the amount deposited in the bank on the deposit transmittal submitted to finance. It was recommended that a report from My Active Center be printed for all cash and check receipts by payment date. The report should be reconciled to the amount of cash and checks on hand and must agree to the bank deposit. No loss in revenue collections or discrepancies in deposits were noted in the audit. It was also noted during a review of credit card payments made by customers for programs at the senior center that not all customers were paying the required 3% convenience fee for using their credit card as a form of payment. The 3% convenience fee is charged to customers for the purpose of defraying the cost of credit card processing fees by Card Connect. Discussions with the senior center director revealed that it was uncertain as to why this was occurring. It was recommended that the 3% convenience fee be consistently applied to all customers who use their credit card as a form of payment for senior center programs. Not only will adherence to this recommendation treat all customers equitably, but it will also assist in properly defraying the cost of charges applied by the credit card processing company for the use of credit cards. Follow-up. Internal audit worked with senior center staff and My Active Center technical support staff and corrected the issue pertaining to the 3% convenience fee anomalies, which was due to a software problem. All customers who pay with credit card are now properly charged the 3% convenience fee associated with payments made with their credit cards. Further, the senior center is using daily reports from My Active Center to reconcile and deposit daily collections. However, most recently on March 28, 2024, the Human Services Commission approved removing the 3% credit card fee in entirety to members who use credit cards for payment.
Thank you. Any questions on this audit? Mr. Testani?
Yeah. Hey, Connie. So since I'm like a big proponent of the senior center, just on my own curiosity's sake, why did they eliminate? Because it's the credit card company that charges. So the senior center is going to absorb the
Yes,
3%?
the senior
per
center will have
transaction?
to absorb that 3%.
Do they have an amount of what that's going to do to their budget, an estimate even?
No, I don't have that figure at this time, but I could get that for you.
Sure. I just would be concerned. Do you know, let me ask you this. Do you know how many of those transactions were done by credit card? Do you have like a rough estimate as to what had been done before they decided to waive the 3% fee?
Well, before they waived the 3% fee, obviously the customer was bearing that cost.
Right.
And so it did defray what
So
the
there's
credit
like-
card company was charging.
It-
I believe that they voted to remove it because obviously the senior centers, seniors are unlimited fixed budgets and incomes, and they felt, to
give them a little break. They would not charge the
No, and
3% fee.
I totally agree with that. I just, again, my concern would be, are they going to have enough money in their budget to
Right.
absorb the 3%
Yeah.
it's per transaction, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Sounds like they really weren't charging it anyway, though, most of the time.
True. yeah,
Right. Some
that's
people
the
were
point.
charged, some
That's right,
weren't.
good
Yeah.
point. And they didn't have an explanation about why some were charged and some weren't.
Well, they didn't even notice until I pointed it out in their report.
You know, one thing I'm curious about, again, thinking I may take some Zumba classes soon, would be, how,
Cameras in the, okay.
Yes,
I'd like a video of that.
I'll recommend that they put cameras in
Thank
the
you.
Zumba room.
how do they track how much, like, I know they charge per class and, you know, they pay their instructors a certain amount. Is there, and I, you know, she may have talked about this in the budget. I just was curious how they track that, if that came up at all during your audit, how they track how much they take in from the exercise classes, how much they pay out, those kinds of things. Just
Right.
curious.
They do have a computerized program there where they have all access to all that data, how much revenue is taken in per program and so on. I'm not sure if they do like a revenue and expense and, you know, a profit loss type of thing on their classes. I could ask Julie.
No, that'd be great. I just be curious because that's obviously a big source of revenue, I'm sure, for them, especially since they'll be getting a new participant.
Yes. And a lot of seniors are using credit cards and charging.
Jack, use cash. Don't use your credit card. Don't hurt them.
No, definitely. Only use cash.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You're welcome.
Yes.
Okay, the next audit, revenue generated by the Office of the Town Clerk. The Town Clerk's office has the capability of allowing customers to make payments for required services over the counter using credit cards. The credit card processor currently in place is Card Connect. A review of Card Connect monthly statements from January 2023 to September 2023 for the Town Clerk's office revealed that no over-the-counter customer credit card payments were made during the 9-month period. Internal audit recalculated the total expense associated with maintaining the Card Connect credit card system within the Town Clerk's office over the 9-month period. It revealed that fees paid during this time totaled $639.75. It is recommended that the town clerk commence using the credit card machine and also post visible signage at the front desk in their office, notifying customers that their office accepts credit cards as a form of payment. Currently, only cash and checks are accepted by customers over the counter at the town clerk's office. Implementing credit cards as a form of customer payment is not only convenient for the customer, but also reduces the amount of cash and check transactions handled by the office each business day. The town clerk agreed to the implementation of credit cards within the department, but would first like to research more appropriate companies that deal specifically with the collection of town clerk fees, and would also like to consult with other town clerks in other municipalities to see how they handle customer credit card payments, as these fees are also governed by statutory requirements. Do you have any questions?
Is there an update since this audit was completed?
I did speak to the town clerk earlier this week, and she is still conducting a survey of other municipalities and speaking with them, and she had some suggestions of different credit card companies that she thought would be more appropriate for her department. So as it stands right now, she's still not collecting payments with credit card.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mottola?
When you say credit cards, does that include debit cards?
Yes,
It
credit
does,
and
so
debit.
it's all right. So they weren't even using
No,
debit cards. It's
correct.
check
Only
or
cash and check.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Other questions? No.
And last but not least, audit of the Golf Manager Agreement and Golf Independent Contractor Agreement. Internal audit conducted an examination of two separate agreements. The Golf Manager Contractual Agreement, which pertains to compensation to be paid to the manager, Robert J. Bigonette, of the town's golf facilities,
dated November 30th, 2020, and the independent contractor agreement between the Town of Fairfield and Mr. Bigonette for compensation to be paid as an independent contractor for golf programs provided to the public, dated March 15, 2023. The golf manager contractual agreement includes compensation to be paid over a 5-year period from calendar 2021 to 2025 in the amount of $806,984. The compensation paid to him for the time period was correct and in accordance with the contract. The contract also requires the golf manager to maintain a fidelity bond throughout the term of the contract. The fidelity bond provided was not on hand with risk management per the terms of the contract. It had also expired on December 18, 2023. The golf manager supervises the collection of all fees on behalf of the town, including golf fees, season tickets, identification cards, etc. H. Smith Richardson and Carl J. Dickman golf courses generated $2.8 million in revenue during fiscal year '23. The purpose of the fidelity bond is to provide the town with insurance protection against losses caused by the contractor's fraudulent or dishonest actions. They're also known as honesty bonds, which protect the town against monetary losses. It is recommended that the required fidelity bond be obtained from the golf manager as required by contract, with copies maintained on file with risk management, purchasing, and recreation departments to ensure that they are up to date. The required certificate of insurance on hand as provided by the Recreation Department under the Golf Manager Agreement also did not name the town of Fairfield as the additional insured. Follow-up. Internal Audit requested a renewed current fidelity bond and certificate of liability insurance, which I received and are on file with the Purchasing Department, with copy to the Director of Recreation and Risk Management. The town is properly named as the additional insured. It is also recommended that the town risk manager be the point person assigned to ensure that all contracts stipulating that certificates of insurance be on hand within his office. This requires a coordination between purchasing, recreation, and the town risk manager. Part of the requirement of risk management should be to ensure that all contracts have the correct liability coverages, are up to date, and name the town of Fairfield as an additional insured. The town being named as an additional insured is important as it provides protection against financial liability and reduces liability risk in instances of unexpected lawsuits or claims. A request for the independent contractor agreements for calendar years 2021 through 2023 revealed that there was no written contract on hand between the contractor and the town for the 2 years covering calendar 21 and 22. Therefore, it could not be confirmed by internal audit whether the percentage of compensation paid to the contractor for golf program revenue in these 2 years was correct. The contractor had been paid 75% of gross revenue associated for specific golf programs provided and taught by him over the 3-year period examined. It's recommended that all contracts be formalized in writing between the town and outside parties, especially those where a percentage of revenue is shared with an outside contractor. This will clearly outline and define the terms, responsibilities, obligations, requirements, and expectations of both parties. Formal approval from the Golf Commission should be obtained and maintained on file to justify the review and approval of the agreed-upon percentage of revenue share with all outside contractors. Follow-up, an audit of certificates of liability insurance of all town contracts, including town leases, is currently underway and is anticipated to be completed before the close of the fiscal year.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Walsh.
Did your audit review whether that position is allowed under current Department of Labor laws and regulations to be an independent contractor? Because all those rules and regulations have just changed again. It is so hard to be an independent contractor, and I know those laws because I've represented people on them. I have no idea how Mr. Bigonette, and I like Bob, and from what I heard, he's doing a phenomenal job. This has nothing to do with him. But I have no idea how that position can be an independent contractor under the rules. There's so many things. We require him to do his job, and we supply his office, and we supply the tools of his trade, including cash registers, including this body approved getting him a golf cart that we paid for. He uses our facilities, he uses our golf course. I don't understand. And here's the problem. Connie, you've been here, right? You were here when we had an assistant town attorney by the name of Eileen Kennelly, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and she was an independent contractor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But towards the end, she claimed, and she was correctly found to be true, and we owed her lots of money for that she was a town employee.
That's correct.
And we also had to pay her towards the pension, correct? And did she qualify for a pension?
Yes, she did.
Yes, she did. And we didn't find that out till all these years where she was an attorney. She knew what she agreed to. But then at the end, she filed an action saying, no, actually, I was under the law, I was an employee. And I don't want to get down the road with this situation with the position of the golf pro. And I would like to.
You didn't cover that during.
No,
your-
I strictly.
Can you,
We
can
need
we,
to-
can we
the
follow
terms
up
of-
on this? Yeah,
Sure.
okay.
And you want to know if he is as an independent?
Yeah, and I don't know if
contractor?
you want to ask the town attorney or whoever, but let's have a follow-up on that. So we
Could we get a report from the town attorney and our human resources director in regards to this position? Because we better know now before 20-something years passes by. And we owe 401A contributions for a lot of money. I'd rather, if he's supposed to be an employee, let's do that and start budgeting properly for it. Because I don't want to get caught in this issue that happened with the assistant town attorney again. And the Human Resources Department should be monitoring every position in town, every independent contractor, to see whether it used to be a 20-point test.
Right.
20.
Right. There are
You
requirements
met
that.
certain ones of them. You were an employee, because I had clients who would come into me who were getting in trouble with the Department of Labor on this because they weren't paying their proper taxes. They weren't making their proper contributions. So they would say, I'll give you an example. Somebody would say, oh, I want a sales force. So I'm going to say that Greg's my sales guy, but he's doing it independently. He's going to be called Curley and Associates, and I'm paying him. But I'm not paying the payroll taxes I'm supposed to be paying Craig if he's really an employee. If I'm paying for his PC and I'm requiring him to come into my office 3 days a week. So I think when I see this position, I don't understand under the law as I've seen it, and I've been before the Department of Labor representing people, how this could possibly not be an employee of the town.
I don't think we want to draw those conclusions here, but we should get a follow-up, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll send
Okay.
an email to
Yeah.
the town attorney
Okay,
tomorrow.
Mr. Matola?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I'm just confused. Do we have a town risk manager, or we still don't have one?
Well, we do not have an official.
we used to
We
have.
do not have a position that's with the title risk manager. However, we have an assistant director of human resources who has assumed
Who's
the
doing
roles
this.
and responsibilities of the risk
Okay,
manager.
that's right. All right. And I'm not putting you on the spot, what you want to do, is the administration okay with that, or are you still considering having a risk
no.
manager?
Yeah, this, I know, and I think this came up in some capacity during the budget. Some of the financial pieces have actually now resided in finance to help with that, and it's not really the best fit. He's doing the role and it's covered, but we're working on determining though if that necessarily needs to be an entire person or it's a 0.5, FTE, and then they have something else because we have so many other things we're looking at. But being in HR and in someone who's the number two in HR with a lot of other moving parts is really something that's not going to live much longer.
Yeah, good. That's all. I'll leave it at that. I'm glad you're looking at it because to me, it's a very, very important position and job duty, role, tasks that you have to have. Because if it's done correctly, it saves the town a lot of, for lack of a better term, agita and exposure and potential liabilities and so on and so forth. So I'm glad you're looking at it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that? Because I have a risk manager, and a couple years ago, that position was eliminated, and we were told it wasn't a full-time position. So now we have an assistant director that's part of his job. But I was confused about what you said. Do you think it's a full-time position, or is it not a full-time position?
There used to be, as I understood it, a full-time position for
Yes.
manager and risk manager. The assistant director of HR is a full-time employee of the town. It is.
No, I understand all that. But the rationale we heard when the former full-time risk manager was let go was that he wasn't busy full-time, and that function should be absorbed by somebody who had other things to do, which is currently what we've got going on. So I'm just asking, so you disagree with that assessment? You think we should have a full-time person?
No, not.
Or we haven't come to
No.
that conclusion yet?
We haven't come to that
Got it.
conclusion, but I think what we've stated is generally our assessment has been that they probably can be doing other things, but where it's currently placed may not be the best fit. In HR, with the number two in HR, we might look for it as somebody who it may turn into something. We've looked at a lot of different things, perhaps finance that need to be done. It may be somebody in that. A lot of that is actually numbers, insurance, quantifying things, including even preventatively with risk. There's quantifying things out like this. Even this is a risk type item. So it may be, okay, we have a need somewhere and we can better align that person and that function so that they're weighting more of their time towards risk, but then aligned with other needs.
Okay, that's helpful.
Does that make
Thank you.
sense?
Okay, Mr. Walsh.
Following up on what Mr. Mottola said, I too agree that it's a very important position and that we need someone. Is the assistant director experienced, has professional experience doing risk management, or is this somebody who just took the job because nobody else had it, so they just took it on?
He has experience now, and he took the job, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago, and did not have that experience.
Okay. Then I even more say that we should be trying to find an experienced person in risk management who has the experience to deal with it, because of all sorts of things that could come up in regards to, I'm not going to get into them now. It's not the meaning to do this, but you need experience in this area, and it just doesn't come on the job in a year and a half. So even more of a reason why we should get somebody in here who knows what they're doing as a full-time job.
Mr. Penley? Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
So when you were looking at it, though, I guess your findings found that the insurance policy was never even sent to HR or wherever it sits in the first place, right?
Correct.
So
When I had,
even if you'd had a risk manager, wouldn't have gotten in there anyhow.
Yes.
So it just sort of sat on the wrong desk.
yes, I had contacted the person who does risk manage, I call him the risk manager. And he had not received the fidelity bond or the certificate of insurance. And it's very important that these documents be on file and up to date and current and have the correct dollar limitations and amounts on them. And it's not going to be a problem until it's a problem, until something happens and the insurance isn't in place or the limits aren't correct, So that's part of my next audit, because I just want to see what we need to do. How many certificates do we need? Are they in place? Are they up to date? That sort of thing. So that'll be my next report.
That's great, and I think I agree with what Mr. Mottola and Mr. Walsh are saying, and I think we talked about this during the budget process too. Totally in favor of getting a someone who's solely responsible for risk management. But also, I think what this is showing is that even if you have the right people in place, a lot of it comes down, and you guys have talked about this a lot, to processes. If it's not getting to the right desk, it doesn't matter whether you have the best risk manager in the country. And, some of that is I don't know what's going on, but, it might be, if it's all on paper, that's a problem, right? If it's all just like filed away in Windows, that's a problem. So some things just like the problems are systematic, right?
Right, right.
Technology.
Right. We do need a coordination between the risk manager and the departments to ensure that he is getting the correct information that he needs.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, even like the certificates as an example, we've talked about, right now, if vendor sends a copy of it, that's acceptable. That may be acceptable in the interim at a contract or contract renewal, but then requiring that hard copies be sent directly from not just the broker, but the actual insurance company. Those are things that the larger agencies oftentimes do automatically, but we can require. Some of these things at certain intervals, there's refreshes on, if something expires, but yes, making sure that the systems are prompting, okay, this certificate's expired or this bond's expired, things like that. And that's going to be a system piece for sure. So thank you for the feedback, and it's helpful.
Yeah,
to try to
agreed.
address it.
And just to follow up, I mean, because I think Shane hit on it exactly. If things are going on out there in the town and people don't know what they're like, when a contract is approved, I mean, even at the Board of Selectmen level, maybe that's got to be an item to check off before you approve, is to make sure that, if these certificates are required, they've gotten to the right place. Because otherwise, if things are happening and the risk manager doesn't know about them, the risk manager can't be effective. And that's not an unusual problem. If you have people that are authorized, whether it's boards and commissions that are approving things or department heads that are approving things, and they're authorized to do that, but they don't realize the steps that they're supposed to go through, then there has to be a way to make sure that those approval processes include looping in a risk review. So as we do that audit, I mean, I think that's got to be an important part of the process, because I think just telling people, gee, you got to send somebody a copy, those things, ultimately, we're going to miss things that way.
Right. You have to implement a process,
Yeah.
put it in place, make sure it's communicated.
Right. That things can't get signed off, contracts can't get approved without making sure that's a step. All right, thank you. Any other questions? That was the last audit, right?
That was the last one.
Okay. Any other questions on this audit or anything else for Connie? I'm sorry. We don't have public comment. We had it at the beginning of the meeting. But if you'd like to send an email, we'll certainly respond. Okay. You can send an email. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we are going to move on to item 6. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer amounts among departments per the backup. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Matola, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Okay, the backup for this item is posted online on page 124. Who's going to take us through this one?
Yeah, I certainly can.
By the way, thank you, Connie.
Yeah. And so there's this schedule walks through. It's similar to what was presented in the past. We did remove the severance portion for the former first select person, and we are looking at a total number that we need to transfer of 110,957. That would come out of the proposal is that would come out of the surplus transfer line within the budget for the current fiscal year. At the bottom right, you'll notice we have in there total exit funds of 121,585. There's numerous offsets due to, like vacancy savings in a couple of the different lines. And so it actually just reduces it by roughly $11,000. So we don't actually have to transfer the full amount that we paid out. So there's just a little bit of savings within there. So we calculated that out.
Questions from the board? Mr. Mottola.
I know this came before us prior, but we had questions. I guess my only question on all of this is, I'm assuming that with respect to unused vacation, severance, so on and so forth, Human Resources has looked at that and these payments are justified. In other words, were there records kept of, for example, the prior CAO using vacation days and them being accounted for, which allowed you to get to a point where you could calculate unused vacation days? I mean, how did you come to these numbers?
We utilize what was in the system that was entered by our predecessors in those roles.
Okay. That's what you
the best
used.
that we've got available information-wise.
That's fine.
We utilize that.
All right. So whatever was entered into the systems, that's what you relied upon.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Just to follow up on that, so people in those senior positions, are they sort of on the honor system to just report and input their vacation? Or is there a process around that?
Yeah, everybody reports that information out.
But if you're if you're an employee who's got a supervisor, I assume your supervisor is signing off somehow, but if you're what's the process for senior people?
The department heads then ultimately sign off on each department, and if those department heads.
So nobody signs off on the department heads? No.
No.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Why wouldn't the first selectman sign off on the department heads? Like, why wouldn't the department heads on their own stuff have to request time off or say what time they're taking off? And there'd be a sign off. The buck stops there. I mean, Mr. Gerber, you're in the seat now. I know you weren't then, but, wouldn't you think that as the CEO, you'd have to sign off on department heads? I mean,
Well,
my CEO has to sign off on mine.
yeah.
I mean, presume that you've worked at places where someone had to, sign off on your stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've worked in places where you would put in for your time off.
Yeah.
And we don't have a system for that for department heads. And I think it would probably be highly unwieldy. I don't think we've ever had that system in place. But we are hopefully pretty soon going to have a system in place where we can track that stuff, and where, if people are coming in to the office with a piece of paper, having me sign off on it, it probably would, at this point, would be, a big waste of my time. But once we have it so that I can click a button, I agree with you. It's just never, as far as I know, it's never been done before.
Okay. I've worked in numerous places where it wasn't that unwieldy somehow. I mean, I'm not saying I knew all the ins and outs of it, but I'd file a request. The request would be signed off by my superior, and that would go down to HR as being approved, and they would keep track of it.
I mean, most of the places I've worked, highly structured, but it actually didn't work that way. If you were a senior person, you would just put in for it, and it would be tracked maybe by your administrative assistant. But, that could be your experience. It's not really mine as a senior person.
Mr. Mottola?
Yeah, my only concern is I think for senior people, I understand what you're saying, they want to take time off, they're entitled to it. I'm sure they should notify you that they're taking some time off. My concern is if department head Joe Smith has 5 weeks vacation a year and is taking time off, I want to make sure, and I'm sure you do, that that's documented. In other words, it doesn't go to human resources and they document that he's taking the time off. That's the system I'm concerned about.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure I understand. There's two things. One is, well, I believe we carry over way too much time off.
Yeah.
And so that's a
Okay.
policy I believe should change for senior people. No one should be leaving and getting paid out 5, 6, whatever, 5 weeks. But the other thing is, yeah, I mean, we should have a system where it's accurately tracked and checked. I mean, you could spot audit it as well.
Yeah, thank you. I would just, I mean, I never had to have anyone sign off on my vacation, but I also didn't get unused vacation paid out when I left an organization. So I don't think you can have it both ways. I mean, I think, I think right now people can get, is it 12 weeks or 16 weeks maximum paid out? It's a lot. And it is, that should not, we can't have a combination of the two.
Well,
Is it?
I'd have to check. I mean, it goes per bargaining unit for those amounts, I believe.
No, the department head policy that we've been looking at. I know that's under review, but as I recall, I thought it was up to 12 weeks, which is, no?
I'm pretty sure that it's not up to 12. It was maybe closer to 4. I can go back and double check that. But I think you may have been in a previous ones, but it had been brought
Okay.
back down. But what I would say is, to your point, fair, can have it both ways.
You can't have, I mean, for me, like, I didn't have to ask anybody, but it was use it or lose it,
Yes.
And that encouraged people to take their vacation. I mean, it's not supposed to be a bonus when you quit. So the bargaining agreements aside for department heads and other people, because I think I agree with Mr. Gerber. I think it's somewhat impractical to have, maybe in a smaller organization, yes, but in a larger organization, it's probably impractical to have the sign-offs and requests, and we don't have a system for it. But yeah, if you have a certain amount of vacation, you take your vacation. And, I know wherever I've been, it's December. Everyone's like, I got to take my PTO because I'm going to lose it. I mean, you could carry over, I think, 5 days for 6 months, and then it was gone. So, anyway, something to think about as the policy goes forward. But this is what it is. So we have these amounts here. We have $44,000 of this stuff. And the reality is we just had to rely on whatever people self-reported. But this is the number that we got from Munis, and so this is the amount we're obligated to pay. Okay. Other questions on this? Mr. Curley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item came before us a couple months ago, and obviously it led to a discussion about the severance for the former first selectwoman. That I can obviously see on the schedule as that amount was removed. Have any of the other numbers changed, or is that the only change from the schedule that's in front of us?
The only other thing is that we had, on the last one, there was a concept of possibly pulling from the accrued compensation line, and we decided not to, and instead to suggest to pull it out of the contribution. The reasoning on that is that if we pulled it from there, we'd have to put it back into there, leave it sitting there on the balance sheet. It's just going to, it's moving things back and forth. So at this point, leave it in place. That's all. So 6 to 1, dozen the other on that.
But no numbers of severance or
But
vacation?
no numbers other than that. No. That stayed the same. We did remove that one line and set up a receivable for that to come in over the course of the next year or so.
So the dollar amount that we're asking to transfer, or we're being asked to transfer, is the 110,957, correct?
Correct.
And then with respect to the first select woman's severance that was removed, obviously that was item when this was in front of us the last time, and I'm sure much has transpired since then. As an elected official in town, I get asked around town all the time what the conclusion of that was, but that was never brought back to this board. Can you give us an update on how that worked out?
Yeah, I believe this was made public. The former first select woman will repay that amount through deduction from her stipend as a select woman, currently a select woman.
Okay, and it's not a big dollar amount, so I'm glad that it was agreed that it would be repaid, and the dollar amount's not material in the grand scheme of things. But does that resolution put the town at risk in any way with respect to wages paid in a prior year versus and recouped in a subsequent year? I mean, point being, her earnings last year would have been higher, which potentially could influence her pension. Her pension payouts may be adjusted accordingly. I'm just concerned that the town may be exposed to some liability if we've somehow overstated her earnings in the prior year.
But you're not, she wouldn't have been eligible for the town pension you're talking about.
The state, any pension, state pension, town pension.
So the question being, and if I can I just, are we sure we've reported this correctly? I mean, do we amend a W-2? Like if we paid an amount in error and it's being paid back, like did we look at and ensure that we were doing the appropriate reporting of this?
You may know, David. I'd have to double check with HR.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be helpful because I know that we've had, well, we've got a payroll review coming soon, but there are penalties if we do that incorrectly. So it would be helpful to make sure that we're doing that correctly, because if it was paid in error and it's being paid back, it seems like it should have been adjusted to last year.
We can confirm that, but I always was under the understanding that your actual earnings in that particular year get reported. She reported at that point. Obviously, any number of variables can then change in a subsequent year. So she would.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
But we can certainly confirm that. As for pension or 401, she was, it's public record. It's just not opted into the 401 in the town. She's a part of a state pension system.
Right, but we're reporting numbers to the state, right? So I think the question was, are we sure we're reporting things properly? Because this does affect pension payments and other things. So, that I think that's important to understand. Just make sure that we've asked the question, that we've done that correctly, so that we don't have the town reporting this incorrectly.
Yeah, and it certainly could come up, and we believe that we had, but we'll go back and double check the IRS piece and anything to do with the state. It's my understanding in regards to this piece that anything to do with the state, with the pension, was actually done, would have been done not by the town. So the town had some transfer amounts that were done.
We don't have to get into the detail. We just want to make sure the town is not incorrectly report, because if we paid an amount in error and it's being reimbursed, and we, inadvertently reported that in a way that impacts pension calculations, we don't want to do that, right? We have to make sure we did it right.
So the short is, I've asked the question
Okay.
more than once. We'll go back and double check on.
Yeah, maybe.
I had not asked the IRS one specifically again, so we'll go back and double check that.
All right, thank you. Other questions on this calculation? Anyone? Okay. Okay, so all in favor, ready for a vote? Okay, so all in favor of approving the transfers from the various departments, or to the various departments listed on the backup materials from budgeted surplus in the amount of the aggregate amount of $110,957, please say aye. Okay, Ms. Leclerc is not here, so it is unanimous 8-0. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, So we will move on to item 7, which is to hear, consider, and act upon the draft minutes of March 6th, March 13th, March 14th, March 20th, March 21st, March 26th, March 30th, April 3rd, and April 9th of 2024. We will vote on these separately because we had various members that were not at all of the meetings, but can I have a motion to hear this item, Mr. Mottola? Okay, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Okay. So let me ask, maybe the easiest way to do this, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dates here, which all board members were present. So let me throw out those dates and see if there are any comments on these minutes. So the dates are March 6th. That was the meeting, I think that was right before the budget hearing. So March 6th, 13th, 14th, 26th, and April 3rd. Does anyone have comments on any of those draft minutes? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes of March 6th, 13th, 14th, 26th, and April 3rd, please say aye. Okay, it is unanimous, 8-0. Well, Ms. Leclerc is not here, so we probably could have done a couple of the, all right, so March 20th, 21st, and April 9th. Ms. Leclerc was absent, but she's not here to vote anyway, so any comments on those 3 dates? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes of the draft minutes of March 20th, 21st, and April 9th? Please raise your hand. Aye. Okay, it is unanimous, 8-0. Okay, March 30th, this was the public budget hearing. I was absent, Mr. Walsh was absent, Ms. Leclerc was absent. Any comments on those minutes? Okay, all in favor of approving the draft minutes of March 30th? Mr. Penley, Mr. Mottola, Mr. Testani, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark, opposed, abstained, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Walsh. Okay, those minutes are approved, 6-0-2. Okay, item 8, to hear and consider any communications. Does the administration have anything? Sorry, does the administration have anything?
Just a quick reminder that, and I know we've talked about it, our engineering and DPW folks in charge are too concerned to keep going the way we are with the ARPA funds targeted for Rooster River. And we will be coming back here for a bond and transferring those funds for other purposes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, motion to adjourn. Mr. Mottola, seconded by Mr. Ratana. All in favor? We are adjourned.